Hi, folks. I want to go over the requirements for the unit plan, which is the project for this course. So first of all, you'll have a rationale for your unit plan. This should be a narrative of 1 to 2 pages. It should be a separate document. So here's where you explain why you've chosen what you've chosen, what the importance of this unit is to the curriculum, and so forth. And then the actual unit plan itself will have an inquiry question, a theme, a topic, or a title. Again, I'm leaving it up to you as to how you want to frame your unit. And then you should have some essential questions, though. And so I'm going to read to you from a text called Essential Questions. It's by Mateague and Wiggins, who are the curriculum gurus. So they say that questions that meet all or most of these criteria qualify as essential, okay? They're open-ended, they're thought-provoking and intelligently engaging. They call for higher order thinking, such as analysis, inference, evaluation, prediction, cannot be effectively answered by recall alone, points towards important transferable ideas across and sometimes within and sometimes across disciplines, raises additional questions and sparks further inquiry, requires support and justification, not just an answer, and recurs over time. That is, the question can and should be revisited again and again. These questions are not answerable with finality in a single lesson or a brief sentence, and that's the point. Their aim is to stimulate thought, to provoke inquiry, and to spark more questions, including thoughtful student questions, not just pat answers. They are provocative and generative. By tackling such questions, learners are engaged in uncovering the depth and richness of a topic that might otherwise be obscured by simply covering it. Let me give you some examples. Essential questions in history and social studies. Why do people move? Okay. How can we know what really happened in the past? See, these aren't. You just can't answer these with a simple answer. These are thought provoking. Mathematics. What do good problem solvers do, especially when they get stuck? When and why should we estimate? Language arts. How do effective writers hook and hold their readers? Essential questions in science. Is aging a disease? Essential questions in the arts. What influences creative expression? So you get the point. So think about some essential questions that you want to have for your unit. They don't have to have that many. 1 or 2 is fine. But these should be the questions that sort of drive the inquiry or the learning in your unit. Okay. Goals for the unit. These would include procedural and conceptual, and conceptual can mean declarative here as well. Remember I said that they do get conflated. I probably shouldn't have done that here after I spoke about it in my other video, but I did. Sorry about that. You can also add in affective goals like habits of mind, enduring understandings. So again, if you want to instill in students the habit of mind or perseverance, which is the one I'm always talking about, you can list that, okay? But think about how you're going to help them do that in the unit as well. You're going to tell me what text you're using and materials, the approximate length of the unit, and then you're going to have day-by-day lesson plans. I'm going to talk about the lesson plans in just a minute. Formative assessments as needed, and you'll decide where those formative assessments go and how they're used. Activities with purposes for each, so explain why you're having students do something. And then a summative assessment. Remember, I said there could be a couple, depending on how your unit is structured. I think, you want to, again, less is more. You want to try to keep this unit as concise as possible. Aligned with standards, okay? And those are the standards that are applicable to your discipline. And literacy standards as needed. Also technology standards. I haven't given you the technology standards here. They're embedded in some of the other standards, but certainly if you want to add technology standards, you certainly can. And then projected modifications or accommodations. So be thinking about ways you might have to differentiate. We'll be talking about that in another module. But for instance, you may have to create a graphic organizer that outlines some of the work for some students or all students. So just be thinking about what that's going to look like. And then the lesson plan elements are pretty general. And what's the topic of the lesson? What's the goal of the lesson? What standards address? What other goals do you have? what materials, text, or technology you're using, and then the instructional plan. And again, what accommodations or modifications might be used and in what circumstances, okay? So that's pretty broad. So to help you out, I've given you a couple of templates. Feel free to use them or use one of your choosing. So here's one from NETS. These are the technology people, okay? And here's one that I kind of like. I've used it in other courses. So what are the standards? The content standard, the NET standards. What's the overview? What's the short summary? Okay. What are the essential questions? So, we're getting to all of those things. What assessments are going to happen in this lesson? They may just be formative. They may be running records. They may be just observation. But what are the assessments that you're doing? What resources are you using? And here's your instructional plan. Okay. What students need, interest, what student needs, interest, and prior learning provide a foundation for this lesson. How can you find out if students have this foundation? So very much front-loading, scaffolding. And then management, how and where will they work? Are they working in groups? And so forth and so on. Instruction and activities, so what instructional strategies will you use? How will your learning environment support these? And so forth and so on. So these are questions to help you think about planning. And then again, differentiation and closure and reflection. Will there be a closing event? Sometimes we run out of time and the bell is our closing event. But thinking about that, because it's good to close things up and have students have some closure when they leave the lesson. So that's just one, okay? Sorry about my moving things around here. I'm using Explain Everything to show you this, and you can do all kinds of cool things with it, okay? So, and then there's the old Madeline Hunter tried and true lesson plan template. It's much more structured, but some people prefer this, and you certainly can use this. So she has what she calls an anticipatory set. This is where you activate prior knowledge and experience to help them hone in on what you're doing. This is the front loading and the scaffolding I talked about earlier. What's the objective and the purpose? So these are the standards. What's the broad curriculum goal that you're doing here? Instructional input, okay? What knowledge will you communicate to the student? Tell, lecture, stand up, and deliver so the student can understand. So what kinds of things, what kind of talking will you have to do? What kinds of, will be lecture, will it be modeling, and so forth and so on. Do you need to do that in this particular lesson? Okay. And then modeling, how are you going to show, demonstrate the skill? And then checking for understanding. This is the assessment piece, the formative assessment. And then guided practice, having students work under your supervision, doing something that you've showed them how to do. So this is very much a modeling, but very structured process of helping students do something. This works particularly well for mathematics just because it's very skill-based, but it also works for other things as well. So those are just two templates. You don't have to use them, okay? I'm just giving them to you as an example, okay? I'm sorry, there was one more for independent practice. I knew I was missing something. And so what homework are you going to give students? What are they going to do there? How are you going to know that they can do this on their own, okay? Sometimes independent practice isn't appropriate for every lesson, so you don't necessarily have to have it. As it says here, not all steps are present in every lesson, okay? It's not a rigid formula. I don't think it is. Here's a modern version that I like a little bit better, okay? This one pulls in Bloom's taxonomy, okay? So we're thinking about, and again, your standards have those verbs in there. And then what standards of performance will be expected, materials, amount of time. Here it gives you some more information about anticipatory sets. And then I like this too, okay? What input what's the talking you have to do? What's the modeling? How are you going to check for understanding? What questioning strategies are you going to use? This is, again, using Bloom's taxonomy here to think about what the right questions are to get them to that higher level of thinking. Guided practice, closure, and independent practice. So feel free to use any or all of these things. You don't have to, but they're here for you. So you can start practicing with these if you'd like in terms of what your unit plan is going to look like. You can start outlining and fleshing things out. We have a short time to do our work together. You're going to be addressing more things as we go along, but there's no reason that you can't start drafting and outlining and doing some really introspective and reflective thinking about what you really want this to look like. So that's it for me.